Hello, everyone. My name is Chikni Zangmo, and I'm an international relations student currently studying in Webster University, Thailand. And today I'll be presenting a paper that me and Professor Merkutasic worked on, which is titled Cyber Warfare in Desperate Need of a Doctrine. So, the world has seen huge developments in technological advancements in the past few decades, and we have seen that rapid globalization is taking place all over the world. Technology has become a double-edged sword because of this, and cyber technologies have a huge role to play in digitalized military, political, social, economic, and environment-related conflicts. So states worldwide now face the threat of cyber warfare, which comes with the advantage of efficient cyber and information technology. So why should we care about cyber warfare? Well, the answer is simple. It's because cyber warfare will be inevitable in the near future. It is unpredictable. We do not know who perpetrates those attacks, and it is very versatile as it can attack any sector of the state and is difficult to detect. So assessing these volatile features of cyber attacks, the research states that due to the high risks of misuse and the lack of defined doctrine of cyber warfare, it is necessary to investigate cases of cyber attacks that justify the necessary reasons for the urgent need for such a doctrine and the role the US plays in its development. So taking a close look at the literature, the research done on cyber warfare and its implications on the current world order that we live in, the following question emerges. Is it possible to establish a cyber warfare doctrine anytime soon? And what are the alternatives? So this paper engages existing literatures, relevant case studies, and existing cyber warfare threats. Therefore, this paper aims to provide a new solution that fits in the narrative that has already been proposed regarding the creation of a cyber war doctrine. Because at this point in time, a doctrine is desperately needed to prevent a cyber catastrophe. So going on with the literature review, the previous literatures on cyber warfare primarily focuses on defining the term cyber warfare itself. The US Air Force defined cyber warfare as the protection of information and computer networks through acts of offensive and defensive strategies in cyberspace with acts of denials of a rival's capability to do the same. Jankowski and Kolarik defined cyber warfare as the planned attacks by a nation and their envoys against information, computer programs, systems, and data that will result in the defeat of their enemies. So other important literature on this subject emphasizes that a combination of nuclear weapons and cyber war can lead to undesirable and unanticipated hybrid warfare. And in security crisis, cyber warfare presents a challenge due to the power law randomness in which things occur outside the normal distribution of conventional factors of war. So existing scholarly work expresses concerns and dilemmas revolving around the concept of cyber warfare and its destructive potential in non-traditional warfare. However, majority of the articles that are written and published are by military organizations such as United States Air Force, with a focus on primarily the military sector and a traditional view of the international security studies. So wider perspective of international security studies is not emphasized enough given the hybrid and asymmetric nature of cyber wars. Majority of the reasons why cyber warfare could be dangerous has been outlined in most of the literature. However, existing literature does not provide much information on the doctrine aspect of cyber warfare. So the case studies that have been chosen for the paper are as follows. The Estonian cyber attacks, which outlined the wide range of sectors cyber attacks can disable. Georgia cyber attacks, which happened shortly after the Estonian cyber attacks, outlined the social chaos and fear cyber attacks can generate. Stuxnet and Flame showed which are basically computer malwares, showed the catastrophic consequences cyber attacks could have if it gains access to highly digitalized military systems. And so, to present some more detailed recent cases, the Norfund cyber attacks outline the economic implications of cyber attacks, since the Norwegian investment fund called Norfund had been robbed of almost $10 million by hackers. The Mitsubishi Electric cyber attacks also outlined the use of cyber warfare for covert operations such as stealing of weapon designs, etc. And the Australia and Norway cyber attacks, which happened recently, outlined the complexity and the broadness of cyber attacks on state infrastructure. So taking a look at all of this, we can conclude that cyber attacks on various different sectors of a state is rapidly increasing, and cyber attacks do not know any boundaries since it attacks any sector of the state that it can get their hands onto. And the role of the US, whether they are a target or a perpetrator, are still unclear since US has been subjected to a lot of cyber attacks and hacking, but also at the same time, they are suspected to have been involved in some of those attacks themselves as well. So to understand cyber warfare correctly in the broader strategic perspective, it is necessary to classify cyber attacks and outline the consequences individually by sectors. So we'll look into the first sector, which is the military sector. So we know that there has been a lot of advancement of military technology, and which then leads to the digitalization of military infrastructure, which is an advantage, but also comes with the risk. Since digitalization of infrastructure means it will be susceptible to hacking and cyber attacks. So the military control systems are vulnerable to cyber attacks that can turn missiles, nuclear bombs, and unmanned aerial vehicles of one state even against its own population and civilian infrastructure. So moving on with the political sector, hacking of government databases that could leak hundreds of valuable, important, confidential information is a constant threat. For example, Russia's foreign policy now involves a new combination of intelligence operations, corruptions, propaganda, and cyber attacks, which will require a new kind of strategic response from a lot of states, but importantly, the United States themselves. So American hackers have discovered that ballots used in United States elections are susceptible to cyber attacks and hacking. And states themselves use cyber technologies as a means to achieve their goals in secret, as in the case of covert operations or anonymously through cyber attacks themselves. So the economic sector and the economic infrastructure is currently the most affected by hackers. As you can see in this graph, that the total number of incidents and malware detected is increasing rapidly throughout the years. And according to the Cybercrime Report of 2017, the cyber attacks will cost the world $6 trillion annually by 2021, up from $3 trillion in 2015, which is a staggering amount. So in the societal sector, we know that all normal day tasks are conducted on digital platforms, especially with the pandemic at its peak. Everything ranging from classes to transactions are done online, and social infrastructure is highly integrated into the cyber domain, therefore making the system susceptible to large-scale identity theft, shutting down of digital networks and electric grids, breaking into digital infrastructures of transport and medical institutions, etc. And therefore, it has the power to completely paralyze social life. So in the environmental sector, which is one of the most important, it's becoming increasingly important recently with the constant escalation of environment and climate crisis. Cyber attacks targeting industrial control systems and wastewater treatment plants is not uncommon and could cause catastrophic spills, waste discharges, and toxic emissions into the air, affecting human lives and local global biodiversity. So currently, there is no such doctrine that governs the jus et bellum and the jus in bello of cyber warfare. Doctrine itself is defined as a code of belief or a set of principles governing policies in a state. And the purpose of this doctrine, the cyber warfare doctrine, would be to examine the existing cases, therefore create principles for a common understanding that will provide the necessary guidance for resolutions, and will also provide states with the incentives to on how to approach the issue that we are facing currently. So there are a few existing approaches that have been outlined in previous literatures, as in the US Naval Institute's paper called the Cyber Warfare Doctrine already exists. 3 aspects of war fighting, which is a Marine Corps document, which talks about the nature and the conduct of war, are especially relevant to cyber warfare itself. Similarly, the Russian Federation, in its updated military doctrine in 2010, discussed the attributes of modern military conflict and the prospect of early use of information warfare in order to achieve military objectives without using military force. Chinese People's Republic Liberation Army saw information warfare to be an asset to be used against the asymmetric advantage in kinetic capabilities the US currently possesses. Therefore, the cyber warfare doctrine must include aspects of all sectors of a state. So we'll move on with the first sector, which is the military sector. And in the military aspect of the cyber warfare doctrine, it is important to know or recognize the means to win a cyber war and to identify the point at which cyber attacks turn into acts of cyber warfare. So looking into the two main theories of war, the nature of cyber war is very much in line with Sun Tzu's theory of bloodless victory and limited warfare. And if we look into Clausewitz, the accumulating point of victory is achieved when one part reaches maximum advantage over the military and political positions of the opponent. But we know that this is completely different in case of cyber war. So to defend the state from modern military threats, it is necessary to develop a cybernetic doctrine divided into three parts. First, the nature of war and the role of military in this kind of war. Second, an environmental doctrine that concretizes computer networks and information technologies concerning air, land, and naval military operations. And third, an organizational doctrine that would look after the adjustment and organization of already present structures of the military in accordance to what the situation requires in a given specific time. So moving on to the political aspect, cybersecurity clauses need to be reflected in the state's constitution, and it should reflect the principles of unity and aims of promoting peace enshrined in every constitution in the world. A cyber warfare convention should also be held, since the cyber warfare doctrine developed in this way would provide states with a set of rules and principles based on which states and other actors could function in the domain of cyberspace. Moving on to the legal aspects. Inclusion of legal incentives to provide strict guidelines for states and individuals to act in cyberspace, and to also introduce measures for certain behaviors in this domain to discourage individuals from engaging in cybercrime and cyber attacks need to be focused on. The principle of stare decisis, in which judges and legal actors are bound on looking into criterion put forward in previous verdicts offered by the court regarding a situation, can also prove to be very helpful. And the cyber warfare clause should be included in the international law, but the anonymity of the perpetrators makes it difficult to attribute such crimes to a particular state or a particular actor. Therefore, it becomes very crucial for international organizations, states, and private sectors to engage and invest in counter cyber terrorism software and drills. Moving on to the economic, societal, and environmental aspects of the cyber warfare doctrine, the scope of cyber doctrine or cyber warfare doctrine must be formed taking into account a wider perspective of international security studies due to the asymmetric, unpredictable, and hybrid nature of modern warfare. And we also need to rely on careful monitoring of the flow of digital information. We need to encourage education of citizens on the risk related to cyber technologies and the principles of cybersecurity. And cyber authentication must be encouraged and regularly updated to ensure data security. So to conclude, the uncertain hybrid nature of cyber threats is clear with the analysis of the case studies presented above. And it is predicted in the near future that the impact of cyber attacks or cyber warfare is expected to have a spillover effect in all other sectors, affecting all segments of life, and as a consequence, impairing the rights and freedoms of people everywhere. And the creation of a cyber warfare doctrine must be pushed, and the doctrine must include aspects of all sectors of a state, because in the end, a cyber warfare doctrine is necessary, since cyber warfare might as well be inevitable in the near future. So with this, I'd like to conclude my presentation. And I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I'll open the floor for questions. Thank you.